My daughter-in-law laid my debit cards on the table like evidence and said, "Hand these over, Agnes. You won't be needing money anymore." A month later, at the will reading, she smiled the way a person smiles at a prize. Then the banker said, "POD, Payable-on-Death. Those accounts don't pass through the will." And the prize walked to me on paper feet. I have lived my whole life beside water. It teaches you the trick of surviving people. Wait for the tide. I am Agnes Porter, widow, mother, grandmother, ferry passenger, soup maker, and the woman in church, who pretends she can't hear gossip until she's sure it won't help anybody. The Puget Sound is not a loud ocean. It is a steady one. I have tried to match it. My son Brian married Tessa on a day that reminded me of expensive catalogs. Linen, eucalyptus. The grooms tie the exact color of a fig's skin. Tessa liked making things look like they belonged on pages you don't tear out. I do not mind pretty. I mind when pretty becomes policy. She preferred white plates that never saw stew and couches that didn't remember naps. Brian, my boy who used to set his toy boats to sail in the bathtub and ask me to make a storm, learned to smile like compromise. They had a daughter, Iris, with eyes exactly like her name. I live 2 bus rides and a short walk from Brian's house, in a duplex that listens to the water at night. I keep my ferry pass in a small tin, and my grocery list in my apron pocket, and there is a ceramic mug on my table that looks like it could tell stories if I ever let it. I have 1 credit card for my hospital bills, and 2 bank accounts with more history than balance. 1 checking, 1 savings, both marked POD Agnes Porter, because my husband and I learned, sitting at a bank desk with a pen that didn't work, that sometimes you build your future with initials. Tessa never asked me how I paid for things. Her curiosity was reserved for pillows and lighting, but she did notice the way I took out envelopes when school fundraiser season came, how I kept some cash folded in the pocket with my grocery coupons, how Iris's ballet fee never bounced back. "So generous," she would say, the way people compliment an old couch for still trying. Last winter, Brian got a flu that turned mean, and Tessa got a brand deal that turned busier than family. I cooked, cleaned, and left little notes that said, "Drink water," and "Your mother loves you even when you hate soup." Tessa's mother came around with advice like a bouquet of plastic flowers, bright and undrinkable. One afternoon she said, "At some point, Agnes, you'll need one of the kids to take over your finances. It's just the season of life." I smiled and poured tea. Tea is how I give myself a minute to wash words before I answer them. The day Tessa asked for my cards, there was a storm pretending to be rain. She set out a cutting board like a stage and placed my debit cards on it. "We're organizing," she said, with the tone of someone about to sanitize the past. "It's getting confusing. The hospital called Brian, confused about your balances. Hand these over, Agnes. We'll set you up an allowance so you don't worry." She said allowance the way veterinarians say cone. Brian hovered in the doorway, hands in pockets, gilt like a small animal in his shirt. "It's just easier, Mom," he murmured. "We'll handle bills. You can rest." Rest is a nice word when you've earned it. It is a rude word when you are being put on a shelf. I took a breath I could lean on. "Let me think," I said. "I have to make sure the pantry is stocked for the weekend." Tessa smiled like a teacher who's already written late in red, left with my purse heavier with worry and lighter by 2 cards. On the bus, the water on the windows made lines like music. I counted fairy horns in my head, the way I used to count my daughter's freckles when she fell asleep on my lap. I do not drive anymore. I ride. I arrive places on time. I read signs out loud when I'm nervous. At home, I took a folder from the cupboard marked Bank in Iris's careful handwriting. Inside were beneficiary forms from years ago, the ones the nice woman named Sumi at the bank had helped me fill when my husband died. "Some people leave things to the will," she'd said, "but your accounts can have POD designations. When you pass, they go directly to the person you name. No probate. No one can hold them hostage with a filing." I'd nodded and signed. I had named myself as POD for the accounts held jointly with my husband. When he died, they moved into my name. Later, I confirmed the POD on my savings to Iris, small but meaningful, with a note in the folder. For college or a window seat, I slept badly. Dreams came in the shape of hospital hallways and white bowls. In the morning, I boarded the bus that smells like pennies and went to the bank. The branch manager was new, a man with a tidy beard and the posture of a person who ironed more than clothes. I asked for Sumi. "She's at the ferry branch now," he said, "but I can help." "I need to know," I said, "whether someone else can freeze my money if they're organizing me." He blinked, which is polite bank for goodness, and asked for my ID. He pulled up my accounts and showed me lines of words that feel like handles when you need to be steady. Pod, Agnes Porter, Pod, Iris Porter, secondary, on the savings. He explained, "If you are alive, you are the owner. If anyone tries to restrict access, we need a court order or a valid power of attorney you signed. Otherwise, no." I thanked him. He slid a brochure toward me that said, "Beneficiary designations," in big friendly letters. "People forget," he said gently. "That beneficiary is stronger than a lot of opinions." On the way home, I bought cherries because stubbornness can still be sweet. I texted Brian a photo of the bag and wrote, "Bring Iris after school for cherry pitting and stories. Cards later." He sent a thumbs up and 3 cherries, which is modern affection. 2 weeks later, life decided to make things urgent. I was at Brian's house when he had a pain that folded him. I called 911, and Tessa called a neighbor to put on lipstick and watch Iris. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights made everyone look like unbaked bread. A young resident asked me if I was the financial contact. Tessa answered yes so fast, the air tripped. "I'll handle all billing," she said, already looking for forms like opponents. Brian was fine by morning, the pain an angry visitor, with nowhere to stay. Tessa drove me home and parked oddly close to the curb so my door was hard to open. "Agnes," she said lightly, as if offering me one more breadstick. "About those cards. It will be simplest if we cancel them and run. Your expenses through our account. We'll keep receipts." "Receipts," I repeated because sometimes I need to try on a word before I keep it. "And the allowance?" "A set amount," she said, as if set were a word people should applaud. "You don't go out much." I laughed. It surprised me, like a bird in the house. "Tessa," I said, "I live more places than your car does." That night I walked to the shore and sat on the bench that pretends to be a pew. A fairy moaned its hymn. I thought about my husband's hands. We built a table together once, out of wood that had already been other things. He used to say, "Money is a tool. If someone uses it to shush you, they're holding it wrong." I went home and canceled the card Tessa had taken. The bank sent a new one to my address. It arrived in 3 days with my name on it like a little prayer. News travels fastest when it is rude. Tessa called and said, voice flat, "Why did you undo what we agreed? It's unsafe for you to manage money." "It is unsafe," I said, "to ask a woman to hand over her name." She hung up. Brian texted, "Mom, can we talk later? Love you." I sent him a photo of my mug and wrote, "Soup at 6. Bring your ears." The thing about money is that people believe they know what it is. They think it's power, or security, or permission. Money is none of those when the paper is wrong. Paper is what matters. The words, the signatures, the way letters make a fence around what is true. I slept with the bank folder under my pillow like a teenager with a love note. Then came the will reading. It was for Brian's Aunt Marion, my late husband's sister, a woman who baked cookies like the Navy baked bread, consistently and in quantity. Marion had left things arranged with a kind of generosity that gets called old-fashioned only by people who haven't met it. She had named Brian as a co-executor with Mr. Lowell, her lawyer, and left small bequests to cousins and cats, with the remainder to a church pantry and a scholarship for girls who could fix lawnmowers. Tessa treated the will reading like a product, launch. She wore a collar that looked like a sentence underlining her neck. When we sat at the long table in Mr. Lowell's office, she placed a file folder in front of her like a general placing a map. She smiled at me with all her teeth. "Big day," she said. "For who?" I asked. "For us," she said. "Finally, we can put some structure around all this chaos." She gestured at me in a way that managed to include my purse, my shoes, and my ability to breathe. Mr. Lowell read Marion's will in a voice that could iron shirts. Tessa listened the way people listen to a recipe for a cake they think should have more frosting. When it was finished, she cleared her throat and said, "Unrelated but timely. We've decided to consolidate Agnes's finances. We'll be managing her accounts going forward for safety. Here are the POAs." She slid papers across the table toward Mr. Lowell, the way magic shops slide trick decks. Mr. Lowell put on glasses. That made him look slower. He read the top page, then the second, then folded his hands like a person who has built a habit of not laughing in front of clients. He looked at me. "Mrs. Porter," he said, "do you want your son and daughter-in-law to have power of attorney over your finances?" "I do not," I said gently, "especially not retroactively as these forms pretend." I tapped the date with a fingernail that still knows how to point at mischief. Mr. Lowell nodded. "Then these are void. And even if they weren't, a power of attorney isn't a prize. It's a tool. It can be revoked at any time by the principal." He slid the papers back to Tessa like a plate with too much salt. Tessa flushed the specific color people turn when paper refuses to be impressed. But her accounts... Mr. Lowell opened a drawer and took out a form I recognized. Beneficiary designation. PICOD. If Mrs. Porter's accounts are titled with PIOD, they bypass the will, he said. No executor controls them. When the owner dies, funds go to the named beneficiary directly. He looked at me. "Are your accounts POD, Mrs. Porter?" "They are," I said. "And one is POD to Iris after I'm gone." I looked at my granddaughter, who had drawn a small boat on the corner of the agenda. She looked back at me with eyes that remember. "For college," I added. "Or a window seat." Tessa's mouth moved through 3 different opinions before settling on policy. "But now," she said, "we can still manage her money while she's alive. You can help her," Mr. Lowell said. "You can shop with her. You can be kind. What you can't do is confiscate." He turned to me. "Do you need any assistance setting boundaries?" It was the most decent question anyone had asked me in months. "I need a ride to the ferry," I said, and he smiled like a man invited to do something useful. After the meeting, we stopped at the bank. The branch was busy, all line and apology. A woman in a blue scarf called, "Next!" and I stepped forward with my folder. Tessa stood 3 feet away, trying to overhear without admitting she was listening. I told the banker I'd like to confirm my beneficiaries and request new cards with alerts to my phone. We went through each account like names in a family tree. Checking. P.O.D. Agnes Porter. Current owner. Savings. P.O.D. Iris Porter. Upon my death. The banker added text alerts for withdrawals and printed out a sheet titled Beneficiary Summary. She circled a line. No one can reroute these with a phone call, she said. And if someone tries to move money, we'll call you. Tessa could not stand it. She leaned over the counter like a person trying to smell soup from the hallway. What about fraud? She asked. She's forgetful. I am selectively forgetful, I said. I forget other people's agendas first. The banker, to her credit, was a diplomat. We protect customers by listening to them, she said. If Mrs. Porter tells us to freeze something, we will. If someone else tells us and she hasn't authorized it, we won't. Outside, Tessa walked fast, the way people walk when they want the pavement to agree with them. You're being paranoid, she said. We're trying to help. Then, help, I said. Open the mail, keep receipts. Drive me to Iris's recital and clap like Grace. She stopped. Sometimes people need to let their anger see a view. You're making this hard, she said. No, I said. Paper made it clear. You're the one hoping a smile can change a form. The next week was all appointments, a checkup for Brian, tutoring for Iris, a budget I made on graph paper because boxes calm me. I wrote bread and milk and dignity on the same list because sometimes groceries and values live in the same cupboard. I had Mr. Lowell help me draft a simple letter of revocation in case a POA appeared in the wild pretending to be mine. I made a small will for my teacups because teacups need a plan. I slept. Tessa made a new run at the problem from the side. She announced a cashless month in the family group chat. No paper money. For transparency. I replied, nice idea. My pantry uses cash. She sent a thumbs down and a link to an article about scams. I sent a photo of Iris smiling with cherry stains and wrote, fruit is not a scam. I kept my distance without retreating. Iris came over and learned to pit cherries with a paperclip. We made a pie that failed in shape and succeeded in taste. She asked, Grandma, what is POD? I told her it is how you make money behave, even when grief makes people forget their manners. She said, like a secret password. I said, like a public password written down correctly. When the estate checks came in for Aunt Marion's bequests, Mr. Lowell called Brian and me to the office to sign acknowledgements. Tessa arrived with a new notebook that said Q4 goals. Mr. Lowell handed Brian a check. He handed me a check. He handed Tessa nothing. Paper does not hand third parties feelings. Then he looked at me and said, Mrs. Porter, there is also a small account Aunt Marion listed with POD, Agnes Porter. It's here at Bayview Savings. He produced a cashier's check made out to me with numbers that made my pantry stand up straighter. Tessa blinked, recalibrated, tried to smile, and failed. Mr. Lowell continued, We'll file the final accounting, unless there are questions. Just one, Tessa said. How do we stop relatives from hiding money in pods and undermining the will? By writing a better will, Mr. Lowell said mildly, and by asking them, not telling. He closed the file. On the way out, Brian cleared his throat. He is not a dramatic man. He is a Marine layer. He comes in quietly and changes everything if you pay attention. Mom, he said, I'm sorry. I thought we were helping. I didn't see... He looked at Tessa, not unkind, and then back to me. I didn't see you. I'm still here, I said. Help like I'm here. We stood by the door and made a deal. The allowance would be replaced with rides, errands, and a weekly budget coffee, where I would show him the pantry envelope, the alert texts, the graph paper. He would ask me before setting up systems. Tessa could have an opinion about pillows, but not power of attorney. Tessa frowned and then slowly nodded. Fine, she said, then added in a smaller voice. As long as you teach me the pantry thing. I've never budgeted with envelopes. It looks, I don't know, calming. So we began. Every Saturday we opened my envelopes on the table. Groceries, bus and ferry, gifts, pantry, fun. I label fun in red. It helps. Iris put stickers on the corners. Tessa watched, then counted, then started bringing her own small stack of envelopes, with titles like Stage Supplies and Iris Shoes, and one day Mom's Kindness. I pretended not to notice that last one too hard. We made something else too. We made a pantry project in Aunt Marion's honor with part of my pod money. We stocked a church cupboard with rice and beans and baby formula and tea. I put a jar on my counter labeled, Everything Tastes Better Shared. Iris designed a label with a spoon and a moon. Tessa took a photo that, for once, was not a product. That winter, Tessa texted me a picture of a letter. Bank asking about beneficiaries. Do we fill this? I said. You fill your own. I fill mine. We fill the pantry together. She sent a heart, which is a word her thumbs are good at when her mouth is resting. Sometimes disrespect returns, like a tide. It happened in spring. Tessa's mother came by and announced we should move me into a facility, before it's too late. I said, too late for what? She started listing things I had not asked her to list. Tessa surprised me by saying, Mom, Agnes has systems. We have boundaries. The word boundaries sounded different in her mouth, like a fence put up to protect, not exclude. I have PODs, I said cheerfully, and went to check on the pie. On the ferry one morning, I watched a woman stare at the water, the way people stare at complicated checkbooks. I sat beside her and offered her a cough drop, because offerings are a habit that keeps your hands useful. She said she had been told to hand over her cards. I told her there are ways to write yourself into your own future. Beneficiaries, PODs, clean forms, clear sentences. She cried a small, efficient cry. I held her hand because space is nice, but a hand is nicer. My phone buzzed with an alert. It said, Withdrawal, 10:25. Coffee Hut, $10.25. Tessa and Iris were at our budget coffee without me, practicing. I laughed out loud on the ferry. The woman next to me laughed too, without knowing why. That's how hope works sometimes. Once, months later, Tessa brought a folder to my table. It held her beneficiary forms, neatly filled. IRA, Brian. Savings, Iris. Operating account, Brian POD with contingent to Iris. I figured it out, she said, a little proud, a little humble. I thought wills were the only way. I was wrong. Paper is trickier and kinder than I thought. Paper is honest when we are, I said, and it remembers better. She sat. We had soup. She told me without the need to perform it that she had been afraid of lack, of chaos, of being judged by people who measured homes in tidiness. I told her I understood. We talked about control and trust, about how to hold tools without turning them into weapons. We wrote rules for the family. Ask, don't take. Write, don't assume. Feed, don't flaunt. When Iris graduated from middle school, she gave a little speech at the podium with a new haircut and an old soul. She said, My grandma taught me that paper can be a sword or a bridge, We are building bridges. People clap like the sound claps when the wind is right. On the day I paid for a new refrigerator with Paudi interest, I taped a note inside the freezer. If you open this and need food, take it. If you open this and have food, leave some. Tessa laughed and said I was turning appliances into policy. I told her policy works best when it comes with pie. We still quarrel. Brian thinks I ride the ferry too early, and I think his shoes buy themselves. Tessa sighs when I tape labels to shelves, and I sigh when she tries to stage the sofa for company that lives only in emails. But we have paper that tells us who we are to each other, and we have habits that make the paper look like love. Not long ago, Tessa found my old debit card in a drawer and set it on the counter like a relic. We were awful, she said. I was awful. You were scared, I said. Scared people try to control the nearest thing that looks like a handle. Sometimes that's a person. Next time, grab a mug. It holds better. Iris from the other room called. Grandma, what's the pot on the pantry today? I told her. Everyone eats. We walked to the shore that evening, the three of us. The Sound behaving like it had a job and liked it. A ferry slid past, full of people not holding on to each other but not falling either. I put my arm through Tessa's because she is still learning to stand in wind. Brian met us with fish and chips and stories about a plank that had finally gone quiet under his shoes. We ate off paper. We threw the gulls a tithe because somebody should. If anyone ever tells me again, hand over your cards, you won't be needing money, I will take out a form and a pen and say, let me show you how to spell beneficiary, and then I will feed them, because paper is powerful, but warm food is what convinces people to stay and read it. The tide came in, it always does, if you wait where you belong. Agnes Porter.